All right, what the fuck are we talking about today,
Well,
man?
it is a special occasion.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
It's a major.
It's a
not.
birthday.
Well,
We
it's
don't
actually
need to talk
it's
about
a
it.
country's
Hold
birthday.
on. No, it's kind of a double birthday.
Yeah.
It's a national holiday today.
It's a national holiday. It's also a THD holiday. I hereby declare it a THD holiday. Yes.
Let's wish Justin a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Justin.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry,
Guys.
quiet up.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah,
Cheers.
cheers.
Well, I don't know, man.
Is it what is the actual date of your birthday?
Tomorrow? July 5th?
5th.
Yeah. The day after Independence Day. The American Independence Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, growing up, growing up when I was a kid and I didn't know anything about Independence Day growing up in America. July 4th, there's always fireworks, right? Like crazy, especially when we were growing up back then. Maybe less so now. I used to think those fireworks were for me.
So self-centered.
No, as a little kid, because my birthday was the next day and I didn't know about this Independence Day holiday. And so, there was always fireworks. And I was like, oh, these fireworks for me. Obviously, as I grew up, I knew, but when I was
Did your
very
parents play along as well?
young. No, I never really spoke to my parents about it. I just always thought in my head, like, oh, are these fireworks for me? Like, no, when I was very small, right? But, and then now, man, I just I really hate celebrating birthdays now. My own. I really hate celebrating my own birthdays because each year that goes by just reminds me I'm just getting 1 year older.
Justin, seriously, like all these years of knowing you, you definitely almost never wanted to celebrate your birthday, even when you were younger. Like maybe a little bit younger when I first met you. It was more about like let's party, right?
It was like an excuse to party.
But I feel like after turning 30, like I think you started to die down a little bit.
Yeah. I don't bring it up. There have been times I even forgot it was my birthday. I don't like it. And it goes back to like I think our very, very first episode, which is kind of fitting because we're talking about Balvenie, our first episode, the journey we've come on. First episode was about like the midlife crisis. It's not that we're going to talk about it today, but it's really kind of plays into that in terms of like I just don't enjoy the fact that I'm getting older. I enjoy the journey, but I don't enjoy marking my age down, and kind of keeping tabs on this like clicking, like this ticking clock, right? That is, each year that goes by, it's a little depressing.
Yeah, it's like a reminder.
Yeah.
It's a reminder.
It's a reminder. Like
you get to a point where like you're more than halfway to the other side.
yeah,
And that's the scary part.
it's like you're 1 year closer to death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because
Like
when you're
whenever
on
that day
when
is.
you're on the front end of it, like you're 20, you're on the front end. So you're
Yeah.
like, I got a couple more years, right?
Yeah.
But once you get on the back nine, it's like game over, man.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, also I think it depends on the perspective because if you're kind of, unless you're doing something every day where you're just like, I mean, for lack of a better description, ecstatic of what you're doing. You may, like you said, maybe what's the point of celebrating, right? So it's like maybe it's like kind of like a negative outlook, but maybe if you're really pushing every day, pushing it, milking it for what it's worth, why not celebrate?
Well, it's definitely has to do. It's tied in with mindset for sure, right?
Yeah.
So like like my mindset. You guys know me, like, and I've talked about that pretty honestly on this show. Is that I'm always in this mindset of like, okay, what have I done? I always feel like I haven't really accomplished anything, and I put this. I have that mindset, I have that pressure on myself, and it's not very healthy. I don't think it's really helping me. But it's hard to escape from. So like time becomes a very pressing factor in that. The less time you have and the more time that goes by, the less you think you've accomplished because you've had like, okay, another year has gone by, and you still feel like I still feel like I'm in the same place I was last year. You know what I mean? So if you don't see that progress being made, time becomes your enemy. But if you see progress, you can celebrate it because at least within that year, you'd be like, oh, I made all this progress. Look at everything I've done. And you can celebrate that. But when you feel you haven't made too much progress, that's when time is like just like the worst thing in the world. Right?
Can I challenge you on this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So let's go back to this year. This year for you. So what happened this year for you? Why do you have the mindset that you haven't really accomplished anything? Because from an external perspective, I wouldn't necessarily feel that way for you. So what happened this year? I'm just curious.
Like, are you asking me to like recount things I have accomplished this year?
Yeah, like you got married.
I got married. But is that really an accomplishment though?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, if you find someone that you love and that you can be with, like, I think here's the thing, right? We normalize to things. So it's like amazing things. Like, do we really take our parents, like, do we really appreciate them? And it's like, have your parents ever been sick? Or like during COVID, have you ever thought about what would happen like if your parents weren't around anymore? Or have you ever had a dream where your parents were gone? I have. It's the fucking scariest thing in the world. It's the saddest thing in the world. I've had dreams, even when I was a kid, like one of my parents died. So, like, kind of going back to getting married. Imagine you didn't get married. Imagine you didn't have your wife right now. Your life would fucking change in an instant.
Yeah.
So like they call this like, they call it negative visualization or like counterfactual gratitude, where you imagine what it would be like if something that you really cared about was taken away from you,
And then that's when you really feel the weight of like your progress, I guess.
Or that's just when you realize that maybe it's not about progress per se, but it's just like you have something really great, and do you need to have some kind of meaningful achievement or, winning gold medals every day, or are you still moving forward in your life?
I think you raise a really good point. It's crazy because once you think about it, it's so insane how quickly we normalize to things, right? Like you're so quickly, like before, just a year ago, the idea of marriage was like this huge thing, right? Like this huge thing. Oh my God, it's crazy. I'm going to get married. It's like, and even before that was like this concept of marriage was just like this huge life-changing moment in your life, bigger than almost anything that I've gone through, right? So it's like, and now here I am just a year later, and I'm like, oh, is marriage even an accomplishment? It's like, well, like it's so quick how we normalize the things. And I think we do that to a lot of things. And in that sense, I guess you don't really realize you are taking steps forward when you normalize to each step right away, right? Then because that becomes the new normal, that becomes the new standard. So you never really look back and look at all the footsteps that you've already taken behind you.
Exactly.
I guess. And it's crazy, Aric. You mentioned dreams. It's really crazy you say that because I woke up this morning. And I shit you not, I woke up this morning and I was thinking about the dream I had. And I was thinking about this idea of dreams because I keep having this reoccurring dream throughout my life. And I had one last night. And this was like the first time I've actually woken up and was like, wait, so what does this really mean? Because I've always had this recurring dream and I wake up and just go about my day. And that was it. I never really thought too much about it. And this was the first time. So it's really crazy you bring up dreams. Yeah.
What's this dream? Are you going to share it or?
It's a reoccurring dream. It happens in different forms and in different contexts, but the dream is always, I'm taking a test and I'm in school taking a test, and it's either I don't have enough time to finish this test or I have no idea on the subject of this test. Like I have no idea. Like it could be on like trigonometry and I'm like, I have no idea how to answer these math questions, right? So, and it's always this fear of not being able to complete this test, either because of time or because of just, I don't have the knowledge. And like this pressure, and I'm never able to finish this test. And meanwhile, everyone around me is like just scribbling away, handing in their test. And I'm just like sitting there and I have like no idea what to do, but I need to graduate. And it's almost like in this dream, there's always this like very clear pressure, like, oh, I need to pass this test or pass this course to graduate out of this school. And I'm never able to finish that test. And that's how the dream ends.
You've been having this for a long time.
For at least the last 10 years, maybe, I think.
10 years?
Yeah, last 10 years of my life.
Interesting, because it's like you're using schooling as, I mean, in your dreams, there's like a school type of system. Yet you've been out of school for so long.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, I think it ties into a little bit of reality because when I was in school, I always had a hard time finishing tests. Even if I knew the subject, for some reason, I was a really slow test taker, to the point that actually in high school, I went to go, there was actually, because, I went to a rich kid's high school, there was a school psychologist in there. And the teachers had noticed, all my teachers had noticed that I was having this problem finishing tests. The answers he does finish, they're all right, you know what I mean? But he just can't finish the test. So they sent me to the school psychologist, and they ran me through these tests and blah blah blah. And then at the end of it, I was allowed extra time as a kid to finish tests, which at that stage in my life, I was like really humiliated, and I was like just really questioning myself. Like, am I just like a retard? How come no one else needs extra time? I was the only person in my class that ever needed extra time. And I was allowed extra time. They were like, yes, okay, we're going to grant you extra time. Justin has extra time to finish all his tests. And so I was like catered to in like this lone person who needed extra time. And it really sucked in terms of like my confidence, I think, in things. I mean, outwardly, I was very confident. I was part of the popular crowd, and I was, a popular person in high school. But like inside, it just really
Did people make fun of you ever?
No one ever really made
Question:
fun of me.
When you were taking these tests, can you remember why it would take you so long?
It's a little bit of OCD, which I still have now.
Is it a comprehension, or is it because you want to make sure every single detail of what you're
every
taking?
single detail? It's every single detail. Like, you guys just saw me setting up the studio. Like, I spent like 20 minutes like looking at this light. Like, you guys must have thought, like,
where
what the fuck
are you
was I
on
doing?
the
That's OCD.
Autism spectrum?
Well, it goes back.
What are you trying to say, Aric?
It goes back to what I've said about you for the longest time, right? It's like once you focus on something, it's just like you get hyper focused.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use retard anymore. I just feel like I need to move on from that.
We all need to move on from that word.
You remember last time?
I used it and you used it. No, it's.
I feel like I have
sensitivity.
free license to use that word because I am a retard.
No. You get hyper focused, right? And you become hyper focused, and you get like caught up in the details.
Yeah.
And I can see that.
Every test question, even though I've answered it, I would run through it like 3 to 5 times just to make sure like everything is sound before I moved on to the next question. Like my SATs, I finished like I only got through half.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I totally fucked up on SATs.
Yeah.
The half I did get right, I think I scored pretty highly on, but I only got through half because one side of it is because like I'm just a slow test taker. The other side of it because at that point in my life I just didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I didn't really at that time I really didn't care about getting into college.
Well, it's interesting because you really start noticing everybody has their own idiosyncrasies, and I mean, how far you take that idiosyncrasy, if it becomes like a medical ailment or whatever, I mean that's a different story. But it's interesting that for you, how that has become, well, that was a sort of a detriment for you when you were young. But I feel like as you get older, that attention to detail is actually, forget about time and stuff like that, but attention to detail, I think it's a good trait to have.
It brings up something interesting. I heard this recently, this line, and the line is, don't strive for perfection. And this comes from Buddha, right? And Buddha said that attachment to results is the cause of all suffering. So if we zoom out a little bit, you were saying that you don't normally reflect on the dreams. Is there any connection that you can think of between this notion of your dream and then this sense of not accomplishing things and then like midlife crisis? Like, what is a midlife crisis? Is a midlife crisis partially defined by you get to a certain point in your life and you haven't really done everything that you've kind of wanted to do that point? You kind of feel like you're a little bit behind. Is there any connection to that and sort of like taking a test and you get to the point where, okay, the test is over, everyone else is finished, but you haven't finished and you need more time? I don't know. It seems there might be
related.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just almost this idea of like time, right? Whether it's like not enough time to finish this test, I think that's a metaphor to like, maybe I'm feeling I just haven't accomplished enough within the time I have so far, and maybe there's not enough time. I don't feel like there's like less and less time going forward. I don't know. You know, again, I never really reflected on it. I don't know what the psychology of that is.
It makes sense though. I mean, if I were to somehow relate to what you're going through or even the dreams that you had, I tend to have that, you know, where we have discussed previously these, whether it's anxiety or panic attacks, a lot has to do with wasted time as well. Time management, you know, where you are in your life, as you know, as compared to where you want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And that can cause anxiety. And except that I go through that anxiety in real time, maybe you'll go through it during your dreams.
Yeah,
you know,
maybe.
Because even then when I mentioned that I had previously panic attacks or anxiety disorders, you couldn't understand. Yet, what you dream about is that. I mean, it's a form of anxiety. So I don't know. I find it fascinating that you have that in your dream, yet in real life you really don't go through it.
Yeah, I guess like you said, it just manifests in different ways for all of us. Maybe. I don't know.
So you got married this past year. So, you know, that's a pretty big accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't want to keep talking about myself, you know.
Yeah. No. Well, what else? What else happened this past year?
We are reflecting because it's your birthday.
Yeah,
so let's
reflect.
reflect.
We'll get to America in a second.
No one cares.
But
what, you know, like
I want to unpack this a little bit because it's interesting to me.
I think we should talk about like our parents' journey because you kind of mentioned that before. I think
you're trying to change the topic. Okay.
Whatever, man. Whatever.
He's still trying to change his
No. Okay. We're not.
It came out of left field. It was like, we're talking about you. And all the parents come in.
I'm like, so coronavirus.
Yeah, we'll get to it. No, we'll get to it. You're trying to, like, we've switched roles. We've switched roles, right? On other podcasts, I'm like the guy that just like pulls out something from, you know, another. No, I don't want to talk about this just to kind of pick on you in the context of you. It's just more of a metaphor, because you started the show by saying, wow, like, you know, since the first episode, we were only drinking like fucking Balvenie 12, like cheap shit, right? Now we're drinking Balvenie 25, right? And you're like, we've done a lot on the show. So do you consider, you know, having a podcast, like getting everything set up, going through this journey, do you consider that an accomplishment? Like, will you ever be satisfied as a person? Or like, is there some kind of like higher standard for you?
Yeah, that's a fair question. The short answer, direct answer is no. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied knowing myself. But I think there is a degree of satisfaction.
Satisfaction.
I'm fucking this fucking whiskey, man. I'm blaming everything on whiskey. But there's a degree.
We've got a school psychologist outside if you need to.
But there's a degree in which you can be satisfied, to which you can be satisfied, right? So you're never going to achieve full, like you're never going to be like fully like, okay, I have nothing else to do. I'm fully happy. But there's a certain degree, level you can reach. And I just feel like that's what I'm talking about. Like, I feel like I'm not at that level where, of course, there's always more to do. There's always more to improve on. But there's a certain level you can kind of be like almost content with, maybe. And I'm not there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think you've done a lot this year. And I personally have mentioned this before. It's like, I really appreciate the energy and the inspiration you put into this podcast, and you've turned it into something. And I feel really lucky to be part of it. And there were, you know, we always talk about, there are parts of the journey where we weren't sure where we were going, if we had the energy to sustain this, but it's something that I look forward to every week. And I feel like it's a major accomplishment, just like in terms of me building relationships with you guys, and then having a voice that we can share with other people. So then I think when we reflect on like what's happened in the year, maybe we can look at it as like, what have we learned this year? What lives have we touched? And what changes have we made? And just kind of reframe it, and not so much kind of like this unattainable standard of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. The part of the reason this is coming up, like this word accomplishment, is that we at work, I had to write my own like self-review. And we had a very tight time frame this year.
Oh no!
Yeah, I know. It was tight...
Aric has to write his own self-review.
So I had to write a self-review, and I had to go through everything. But the good news this year is just because like there's so many things that happen, and we're all sensitive to like how long this process would take because we're just really busy. So there was like a limit into how many like characters you could use, right? And that just made it a lot easier. So I couldn't go crazy on it. I just had to really focus on what happened, and it's just, the general format is just sort of like, what did you learn? What are your accomplishments this year? And when you really go through and you clean up your thought, you're like, wow, a lot of shit happened this year. A lot of stuff happened. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I also learned like opportunities where I can improve myself. And, there's people that support you. So I going back to this podcast, it's like just doing something every week. We talked about this on that one, The Subtle Art. It's like doing something. We like actually did something.
Yeah.
And by doing something, we're learning, and every week we learn something new. Yeah. And I think it's just really, I think that's a major accomplishment. And I just looked up what accomplishment means. It just means that something that you've done successfully. And so like, I just try to remind myself like every morning, like just to be grateful. So count your blessings, I guess is that cliche. Yeah. But, cause you're only here for a certain amount of time. So you might as well enjoy it.
Well, this podcast is definitely a product of the do something principle, right? That we talked about in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And if you're not clear what the do something principle is, I encourage you, any listeners to kind of listen to that episode. But I mean, this podcast is definitely a product of that. It's just like, okay, we don't really know what to do, but we need to do something. We need to keep moving. Don't stand still. Otherwise you're going to die. Just keep moving. It can be anything. It can be something big. It can be something small. Just do something and learn from that. And who knows where that will take you, right? Just connect the dots like we've always said.
Yeah.
And this podcast is that. I mean, it was never a project where we were like, oh, like we had any sort of like grand vision for it. It was just like, okay, let's do something. Oh, yeah, podcast, that might be fun. Let's try that.
Well, I think that was the result of the conversations we had, because in the beginning, we were not moving forward. We were just brainstorming constantly. And what was the reason for the brainstorming is because we wanted to get out of the gates immediately successful. Like everything was perfect. Like our topics were great. Our presentation was great. The market demanded what we wanted, what we were saying. But then we stopped and we were like, hold on. Actually Justin was the one that really like took the lead on this. Was like, okay, let's not overthink this, which is funny coming from what we were talking about you. Let's not overthink this. Let's just record. Let's just do it and just put it out there. Yeah. And then let's just make this a habit. Let's just do it. Right. And then we were like, Aric and I were like, oh, okay, yeah. I guess,
we struggle with the lack of structure.
Yeah.
And it was like analysis paralysis, because we needed to have like a firm structure. Like, what are we going to talk about? What is the arc of the conversation? What's the narrative we're going to tell? And it was uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable. And then we didn't know how long the episodes would be. You in your head, because you had already started thinking about this, so you had this narrative arc in your head. And so there was a trust that we ended up developing that, okay, like Justin knows like how to land the plane at the end. We're not going to have like a 5-hour Joe Rogan show, right? And then once we started getting guests, we started finding like common themes. And so there became maybe not a grand vision, but there was some semblance and some threads of a vision. And now, like after 40 something episodes, we have written down what some of our goals are, and eventually we'll probably have something that's a little bit more visionary. But like learning, trying to invite like really cool people on the show, like hearing their perspective, like combining this Western and Eastern sort of perspective. All of these things are like key themes, right? And then also just like not standing still and keep editing our perspectives. And so I think those things crystallized based on the do something. We did enough things where we started having a point of view on things.
Yeah, I mean, and there always comes to a point where you have to stop talking and just start taking action, right? And that's always been our problem. And I think based on what I see, I think a lot of people kind of get stuck in that, is that you're always stuck in this talking stage. You're always stuck in the brainstorming stage, the quote unquote preparing stage or the research stage, right? And while all those things are important, at a certain point, it starts becoming just an excuse because you delay from actually doing it.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some sort of just like popping the bubble, breaking out of your own head, and you be like, okay, let's just do it now. It might not be perfect. We don't have the whole plan. We don't have the whole vision. We don't have everything detailed down and written down. We haven't covered everything. But at a certain point, you have to be like, just do it. Otherwise, it'll never get done. And and that's what I'm really proud of.
Otherwise, that test will never be taken. It will never finish.
But if you go listen to our like first couple episodes, like I cringe at those episodes because they're just like so fucking horrible.
I revisited recently as well.
Really? They're really bad?
It's a little cringy.
Yeah, I'm really, like, for me at least, because I'm like, I'm just like fucking, I sound like such a douchebag. So like just from that you can tell.
I don't know
like,
if that's changed, but
yeah.
But I'm proud of that.
If anything, you've doubled down the last year. But you know what? Like, there's no learning without doing, and like there are parts of my life where I've started applying the do something principle because I've always had analysis paralysis. I've always just overthought things and there are parts of my life where I haven't yet applied the do something thing. So it's really interesting. I'm caught in like these two worlds. Like definitely I've moved forward in some parts of my life. And I'm really happy about that. I just get satisfaction out of like getting past this initial, like getting out of the gates, whatever your speed is, and then just doing it and not worrying about the perfection, right? Because like as sort of that earlier comment, the Buddha thing, don't strive for perfection because your attachment to that is the cause of your suffering, But there are definitely
because
parts,
it can never be attained.
Yeah,
right?
It can never be attained, and you're attached to the result, and so like you're focused. It's like that test you're taking. You're trying so hard to get the perfect result that you take yourself out of the flow of actually doing it and having fun. And like I truly believe that if you really have fun at something, you'll be really good at it. Like whether you're a guitarist or a pianist, like because if it's fun and you enjoy it, then you'll do it a lot. And if you do it a lot, like you'll learn from every time you do it. And so it's really fascinating. It's like I'm looking at parts of my life where I haven't yet, applied the do something principle, and there's something kind of holding me back. There are truly a couple of areas that I want to move forward on. And I hope that this year is the year, because like I know what the result is if you do something. And you do get past like your fears, right? And this also goes back to the fear setting exercise from Tim Ferriss, which I think is really powerful because it's not so much that creating a plan of what you want to do. It's kind of removing the obstacles of what's keeping you from starting.
Yeah. Because that's so right. Because you're never going to have the perfect plan. And there's always going to be more you can rethink, and as time goes by and things change, there's always going to be more you can add or edit to your plan. So it's never going to be perfect, right? Yeah. The key is it's not about the perfect plan. It's about removing the obstacles to actually even doing that plan.
Yeah.
No matter how imperfect it is. And I think that's exactly what you said. I think most people need to think about it from that angle. It's about removing the obstacles.
Yeah.
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 For sure.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. All right, we're done with the show.
Well, we were talking about like it being July 4th and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
And what it means, for us. But this is before we started recording. We were just talking like, it's July 4th. We're in China. Independence Day is a big holiday in America, right? Mm-hmm. And like, what does it mean? Like, what does that really mean, Independence Day? As an American.
What's the Chinese term for Independence Day?
国庆节.
国庆节 OK. 所以7月4号是美国的国庆节.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of angles on this. There's the angle of what is July 4th, like in American terms, right? Like what do people do? Like you see some little here and there celebrations at some kind of Western restaurants here, like Cage's has like kind of hot dog eating competition. So there's the actual festival that represents like this holiday every year. There's also the memories that we have growing up. You mentioned like the fireworks, and then there's also just the notion of like, what does it mean to be American?
Well, I mean, let's share real quickly like what it's like. What's a typical way of celebrating Independence Day in America, right?
I just think of the barbecues.
Well, barbecue's a big one, right? People like to barbecue.
Yeah. Barbecue
Right,
outdoors.
Salcao. And then like you
have
have
handball, hamburgers, hot dogs.
you have like the fireworks.
So
stuff
July
like that.
4th's in the summer, obviously.
Yeah.
So then people will go out in the back of and so like a lot of Americans, with all the space we have, we would invite our friends and we would be outdoors on the patio in our houses, and we would then start grilling stuff, right? Hot dogs, steaks,
burgers.
Everyone got together, beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of beer.
Even Chinese Americans, like we probably have some Chinese food up in there, right?
Yeah.
But like it would just became like a
salad.
holiday. It's like May holidays or something. But everyone would go and grill in the backyard. Almost like 100% of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't have a grill in your home, then usually there's some other public area that people will take over and start grilling. And that's a very Independence Day thing.
And what does it mean, right? Like apart from the actual history of it, but like what are the values associated with July 4th? Like family, right? Family, tradition, right? Just this notion of being like American, like we're
national pride, right?
National pride.
National pride. It's encompassed by a sense of national pride mixed in with just using that as an excuse to fucking eat a lot of food and drink a lot of alcohol, right? And just have a lot of fun.
And
right?
wear red, white, and blue.
Wear red, white, and blue,
Yeah. Right.
I mean, growing up, it was a really fun holiday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was
Well,
really
especially
fun.
as you get older, I think,
Yeah.
because it's like we just said, the barbecues and the get-togethers, and it's summer, and maybe some pool parties, and it's like it's an excuse to have fun.
Exactly. In
and
terms
celebrate.
of like the fun factor, it's probably one of the most fun holidays you can have in America.
Yeah, people are off from work.
Better than Halloween. Yeah.
People are
And-
off from work, and
Well, and the thing is, like, I mean, people are brought together, right? Like that's the holiday where everyone comes together. And I think that's the cool thing about being American, is that like whether you're Chinese or you're like, Hispanic, you're Black, African American, whatever color, whatever race, wherever your parents came from, wherever you were even born, in that moment, there's this collective feeling of, okay, we all kind of identify with this really great place, this really great nation. And there's all this symbolism involved, and like we're all sort of together. And like this year is we haven't been in the US during July 4th, but this year is like the first year, not to kind of like be a Debbie Downer, but this year is like the first year where I feel like that's just all kind of fallen apart for everyone.
Oh, for sure.
It's really kind of
for sure.
kind of
For
sad.
half the population.
Yeah.
I mean, for half the population, they're still like fucking fucking July 4th. But like, I mean, obviously we don't need to repeat this, but like everything is so up in the air. America's a mess right now. Everyone knows this. So it's like it's kind of awkward this July 4th. I guess it would be like a very awkward time there because like I bet people still want to celebrate just for like tradition's sake.
But there's
like,
so much going on.
But there's so
Like,
much underlying like, tension.
Logistically, you can't really come together because of the COVID,
yeah.
and then it's just kind of like the whole country is divided, and then you have a leader that's literally trying to tear the country apart.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
November,
No, it's bad. It's
November,
bad.
man.
well,
November.
exactly, exactly.
November. I can't wait.
I can't wait for the November elections because it's going to be the greatest reality show ever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you cannot write a more dramatic
True.
build-up to a reality show.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't imagine it. You couldn't write one.
Yeah.
But that's
more
just but
dramatic
that's
than
also
this.
so American.
Well,
Right?
hold on,
It's just-
hold on. Justin, brilliant point. You could not write a better reality show. And if things sort of like, if everyone comes with their values, enough people, this will be the ultimate reality show, and it will be the ultimate irony.
You're fired.
You're fucking fired.
Yep. No. Oh yeah.
Nice one.
But the Apprentice, right? That was a show.
Yeah.
No, but imagine before any of this happened. Imagine like 3 years ago, right? Imagine 3 years ago. Oh, no. Well, imagine before Trump got elected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were a screenwriter. You were a writer. And you wanted to pitch this major Hollywood studio the script you had written for this show or this movie, right? And you walked into like the meeting and you were pitching them the basic premise of this movie. And you were like, okay, so I wrote this. So it's about a nation... and there is this reality TV show star who's like just like really divisive and like this outward person who's never really been in politics. He goes and runs for president, and he wins the presidency. And the country becomes so politically divided that there's so much conflict within the country. And then at that same time, there is a world global viral pandemic that breaks out. And so they have to come to terms with that, and there's a bunch of drama that goes on with that. And then at that same time, there is also an outburst of the probably like one of the biggest racial like protests in American history going down. You know, there's a Black Lives Matter movement. There's this whole thing that just like this like spark that just burst.
And even before that, there was Me Too.
Yeah, and then before that there was Me Too, and then there's this like this Cold War also happening with China, right? And between the United States and China, like if you
and Russia has been trying to hack the results of this reality show.
There's so many things you can mention, right? There's so many other little like tidbits, gems you can put in there. And so you were to pitch this to the studio heads, they would probably look at you and be like, you have a great imagination, but we need this little to be a little more grounded in reality. We need you to scale down a little bit because it's a little too unbelievable for a movie. Meanwhile,
and then they'll come back and be like, "Can you make Independence 3 instead? Because that's a little bit more believable with aliens destroying the world. You know, I think that's a little more believable."
Right? Independence Day 3. That's more believable. Yeah. Can you make another Armageddon movie? Because that's a lot more believable. Like, how crazy is that? Like, they would probably actually say that.
Yeah.
But this is reality.
So here, I just had, based on the composite of what you guys just shared and like how we had this kind of shared that, imagine, so like whether it's Biden or whatever, right? And then they give the speech, right? And the first thing he says is...
Inaugural speech?
No, not the inaugural speach. Like when the
just like
results...
the debates?
No, the results are announced.
Okay.
And like he wins. The other guy wins. And he only has 2 words. He's all right, like, hello, America. He's like, Donald Trump, you're fired.
I fucking really hope he says that if he wins. That would be, but that's the drop the mic moment, right?
That would be.
That's
like you'd be dropping the mic.
That mic would be the size of Texas. Like that mic.
That is so brilliant. Yes, you should.
It.
Oh, you should write their campaign. Whoever the campaign manager is, like, send them like a note. Tell them to say that.
How
no, seriously, tell them to say that.
Front page, right?
Yeah.
Like,
you
would front page. It would be like, you're fired.
Yeah, you're fired.
Exactly.
You would probably. Yeah. Oh, that's so brilliant. Yeah. You need to tell them that. No, I'm serious. You need to tell them that because they get letters all the time. They get emails all the time from civilians. You should tell them that. That would probably even convert some Trump supporters because Trump supporters would be like, "Oh, damn, no, he didn't. Okay, I like this guy. Okay, okay, I see you, Biden. I see you." You know what I mean?
The 2 most famous.
He'd be like, "You're fired." Biden.
He's all senile and shit.
He'd be like, "You're fires." You know what I mean?
You know what it is? It's like before he goes up there, he wins everything, and he's like fucking senile. It's like, who won? Yeah. Who won? And he's like, you won. Like, who's me?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, look, asshole, you got 2 words. You just need to get it right. 2 words. You're fired.
He's like, you're hired?
And then he's like, goes up there, you're hired.
But that's what's funny. It's like, you know, I mean, I can only imagine the Chinese government sitting back and just watching America and being like, this is why we control everything.
Yeah. Well, it's a reality show for them.
Oh,
they're
for
just
the
laughing.
World.
They're just having a good time.
Yeah. The whole world.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world is looking at America and being like, okay, what the fuck are you guys doing over there?
It's a joke.
They're trying to wrap their minds around it. And so are we in many ways, right? Like,
it's a joke.
And so are the American citizens. I've talked to my friends in the States
Yeah.
in recent times. Like, they're trying to wrap their minds around, like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, but just like you said off camera before, I mean, yeah, of course, in our circle of friends, we're all going to be talking that way, but there's a huge number of followers that do not think that way, you know?
Yeah.
That if they were to hear what we were saying right now, they'd be like, you liberal assholes. You know what I mean?
Antifa.
Well, like, Trump has such strong support. Like, I don't know what the numbers are, but the people who do support him are so, like, united in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're so.
Dude, do you think is it because that Donald Trump symbolizes, for lack of a better description, a powerful white male that kind of, I don't know, speaks to their white agenda? If I'm gonna, speak boldly in that way.
I don't know, man.
Obviously, there are other cultures different races that support Trump as well. But I feel like one of the big narratives that, media outlets or even just regular people tend to talk about with Trump is that he's racist. He's quite extremist, but he tries to hide it at times, and other times he's really straightforward with it. And then you have that idea of, well, maybe if he's speaking, like, for example, what was the recent news about him sharing a video that had this white power guy in the background, and he's like, yeah, people like this are great,
Well, look, I can't speak to what the media is saying about him in terms of all that. I can only speak to in terms of, because I know several Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. Like, I personally know them.
Non-white.
No, they're all white.
Okay.
So but I know them. And they're, very much pro-Trump. And none of them are racist at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're they're not racist people. Like, in fact, they're my friends. Like, I like them. They're good people. And they're not racist at all. But for some reason or another, I never really had any in-depth conversation with them about it, but they're very pro-Trump. So
You think they're still pro-Trump after the handling of COVID? A lot of this, like, basically barely veiled,
here's
racist stuff, right? Like, he basically issues racist stuff online now. Like, it's very thinly veiled, but he just adds one, thin layer of veneer so that he can sort of disavow himself.
But see, here's
very passive aggressive.
Here's the problem, right? So, to your point earlier, Howie, the point I'm trying to make is I think the media likes to play the race card, and the narrative is like he's racist, he's divided, and in many ways, based on his actions and the things you see him say, it is. Like, he called the coronavirus the Kung Flu in his big speech in Arizona or something. I forget where they were, Oklahoma or wherever he had that fucking speech.
Oklahoma, I think.
So obviously he does some stuff that's that's kind of fucking racist, and you see how divisive he is. So I'm sure there is a portion of his followers that are kind of racist, right? But what I'm saying is there's got to be something much more than that, because all the people that I know that are pro-Trump are not racist whatsoever. So there's got to be something more, and I think it plays towards they just see him as kind of anti-system. Like, he's just breaking the mold. He's not PC. He's not conformist in that sense. And I think people kind of just whether they like him, agree with him morally or not, they like what that symbolizes almost. And then there's another portion of the population, going to what you just mentioned, Aric, in terms of do they still feel that way even after his whole mishandling of everything that's been going on recently? And I think unfortunately, there is probably a big population of Trump supporters that if you were to really honestly ask them and hook them up to a lie detector and ask them, grill them on questions about Trump and if they agree with how he handled this and blah, 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 and his morally and everything like that, they would probably say no. But I think because Trump has been so attacked over the years, right? By media, by late night hosts, by everybody, right? That the people who are pro-Trump have dug their heels so deep in supporting Trump, being like, fuck you, I'm going to support him.
No matter what.
That even if he can almost do anything right now, and they would still support him because they're not going to admit that they were ever wrong. in that choice. You know what I mean? They're gonna. So it's almost like a line in the sand now, and it has nothing to do with his policies. It has nothing to do with his actions. It has nothing to do with how he handles things. It's more about, I made this decision. You guys were all against me, and so I'm gonna stick to this decision, and I'm never gonna admit like I was wrong, because that's hard to do. Like imagine, right? Imagine if I was like saying something for all these years, and you guys were like, "Fucking, you're so wrong," and we almost got into heated debates about it. And I was like, no, man, I'm fucking, and I stood my ground for so long. I'm never just going to one day come to you. Well, it'll be very hard for me to one day come to you because of your ego, of like, your face, to be like, oh, I was completely wrong. No one's ever going to say that.
Yeah.
Or even admit it,
Well, Robert Cialdini wrote a very classic book called The Power of Persuasion, I think, or Influence. The Power of Persuasion is one of the classics, right? In terms of like, how people get persuaded or how people buy into stuff. And there are a bunch of principles like reciprocity, social proof, some of these principles. But the one that I think kind of relates to this is consistency. And so like people act in ways that are consistent, or they want to act in some ways that are consistent. And so that's how you sell people things sometimes. It's like you ask them questions that allow them to validate something, and then you present something that's consistent with that, and they can't really turn back. It's like, oh, like you're a fit guy, right? Oh, you like that, right? Okay.
So you pigeonhole them,
and then you pigeonhole them a little bit, and so like this notion of consistency, people will then want to be consistent and commit to whatever they said before, and so it's kind of like what you're saying. They're digging in their heels a little bit, right? And especially then when people make it public. So like, I voted for this person, I talked to all my friends, I supported this person, and so my credibility is sort of on the line.
Well, you've done it so publicly, like you can't, like you're gonna live or die with that now. You know what I mean?
But I think
no matter what.
I feel like he's probably desperate, and I'm just kind of speculating, but I think he's lost some of those people just because, after 4 years, like as the apprentice, like, running a company, like, people can see your flaws. And so, you went into it, and you're absolutely right. Like he was like kind of anti everything. Like he was like the devil, the ultimate devil's advocate, right? Like he was the guy that was going to just overturn all of this bullshit, all of this bureaucracy. But, after 4 years, people see like he has created his own, he's part of the bureaucracy. He's part of the system. He is more in the system than anyone else. So he talked a really good game. He's going to lose those people. And so now he's getting into more extremist kinds of things and trying to tap into some, more demagoguery. I think he's become more racist in his term. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, it was just more like, okay, anti this, anti that, anti these politicians, et cetera, et cetera. But then over time, I think he's sort of lost some of that base. And so now he's trying to tap into other areas and dividing people.
I'm actually kind of an example of that. In the very beginning, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but even asked like our friend James, like in the very beginning, like, in the group conversations, like, this was when Trump first got elected. Like right when he got elected, I was in the camp of like, okay, let's give this guy a chance. Like everyone was ripping on him, right? And it was like, this is like a farce. Mm-hmm. This is like ridiculous. I was the one, and I remember me and James were both like, look, he might turn out to be not bad. Like, let's give him a chance, because I personally always like the anti-hero. I like breaking the paradigm. I like that, right? I like a little bit of chaos. And so I was like, hey, look, I think he might be getting he's not getting a fair shake. And the media is like just jumping on him and paying on him. But let's see like what he really does. Like pay attention to his narratives. Even when I was playing devil's advocate with you on one of the episodes, I was like, well, let's look into like the actual policies he's implemented. Let's like beyond like the tweets, the stupid stuff. Like let's look into like the real meat of it. And he might not be that bad, because there are other presidents before him that publicly, optically, they've been celebrated, they've been popular, but behind the scenes, they've been doing some real evil shit too, right? So I was like always in that camp of like, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I was always like that. I was very fair to Trump for a long, long time. But I just can't do that anymore. The more I see it, and I watch news from multiple sources of news channels. I watch from the left, I watch from the right.
Yep.
I try to absorb as much news from as much varying different like sources as I can. But it's all like ridiculous. Like after now, there's no way I can give Trump the benefit of the doubt anymore. Like I just can't do that anymore. It's so glaringly like wrong. You know what I mean? Like, and I just can't do it anymore. So I think I represent like a portion of that population who are kind of like trying to be fair to Trump, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But now I'm just like completely, I'm pretty anti-Trump now. For
well,
sure.
and people were, I remember some of these conversations, and people were attracted to this notion of like a rebel, especially in America, right? People always have been attracted historically to people that are rebels, that are not part of the system. They're gonna buck the system. Like you look at some of the great presidents, like Lincoln. I mean, like he went against the grain on everything, right? Like he totally went against the grain. He did things that were incredibly unpopular.
Yeah, he was heavily criticized.
Presided over the Civil War. I mean, he did stuff that is just incredible.
I mean, the country went to war because of it. There was a civil war because of how unpopular it was.
And Donald Trump positioned himself as this guy that was going to shock the system from the outside. But as president, you've got a lot of responsibilities. It's no different than being CEO of a company. So you can talk a lot of shit. You can talk all the shit you want. But in those 4 years, if you're a CEO and the stock market crashes or competitors come in, shit happened. He didn't, and he had a good ride for a while. The stock market kept going up. But with the protests and with COVID, basically the business environment changed. And now it's plain as day to see his response. And of course, these things are so, they're just so widespread, like COVID, right? It's not like isolated. It's an invisible fucking, virus that's impacting every corner of the world as long as there's people. You can't hide from it. You cannot fucking hide from it. No one can hide from it. And all kinds of, you have doctors, you have like WHO, all kinds of global organizations that generally want to do the right thing. And you can really see the actions of people that want to help people. And then, this megalomaniac, like psycho, essentially, and who is also, by the way, incompetent. And then, I think it's as plain as day right now. So so now he has to go into this whole other population of extremists and sort of play that up and trump that up.
Yeah.
So,
but what's not helping though, in my mind, is the media, even the left media, which is like very anti-Trump, obviously. They're not helping in the sense that, like, I think the more you attack Trump, the more anti-Trump, the more clear, the more obvious you're being about like your own emotional resentment towards him or feelings towards him, the more you're not going to convince anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, because like even me, like when I look at a lot of the news right now and they're so clearly trying to just like rip on Trump, trying to delegitimize him, trying to discredit him, where it's no longer just objective fact-based reporting, like here are the facts, make up your own mind given these facts. It's more like, here is what I think, here is what we as a news channel think about him, and these are like our very personal kind of biases towards him. The more that comes to play, which is so clear now, so obvious now in all media channels, the more you discredit that source, because it's like, well, clearly you're so biased.
So strong.
So if you're anti-Trump, you're never going to listen to that. You're just going to disregard all of that because any of what they say already is delegitimized to you, right? So it's this lack, and I think it stems from like a lack of trust, both between the people and the media, but also the media and the people. I don't think the media trusts the public anymore to think reasonably for themselves and to exercise some critical thinking and to be like, okay, we're going to trust the public enough where we can just report the facts without the spin, without the bias. Here are the facts. Now, based on these facts, make up your own mind about them or make up your own mind about the situation. Yeah. Here you go. There's no longer that trust. So the media outlets feel like a need to be like, we can't just say the facts. We have to like narrate it to a point where it's like, it's so clearly just biased, you know what I mean? For them to get it through their heads, right? Yeah. So there's this lack of respect that people can think for themselves anymore.
It's a little bit of desperation. They're just so in a panic. And they're so desperate and they're so emotional that they just can't let the facts stand for themselves.
But I think that would actually, because if you actually let the facts, particularly in this situation when we're talking about Trump, if you just report, I think they would have more success if they just reported the facts.
Yeah.
Because now they've gone so far off that spectrum, like on one side of that spectrum, where they're not even reaching the crowd that they should be reaching anymore. Because it's only like pro-Trump people, or no, anti-Trump people that are going to be listening to MSNBC, CNN, these kind of media outlets. So those are already people that agree with you on your side. You don't need to tell them anything. There's no point. They already agree with what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Who you need to reach are the people in the middle who are on the fence, and hopefully the the very pro-Trump people. And those people are never even going to bother to listen to you anymore because you've already lost credibility in their minds.
It's a fair point, but that's not their goal, of course. And I mean, the goal of the media, probably to some extent, is to to enrage and to create outrage, so
Or
that they
the
can
dollars,
they
too.
can monetize. Yeah. But I mean, kind of switching gears, I think, we've talked about it, trying to wean ourselves off of social media and wean ourselves off of this type of media where it's just politicized and they're trying to create emotional outbursts. And then going back to books, I guess the other thing in terms of media is I just try to, I think I mentioned on previous episodes, I don't I don't look at CNN anymore. I actually read Fox News more than I do CNN.
Yeah.
I will reconsider my New York Times subscription, but I think they have some good cultural content. But I signed up for Economist. Whether or not they're biased or not, just the fact that it's based on another continent just helps create some distance.
Yeah.
So whether you create distance by reading books that we're reading 3,000 years ago, or whether you create some distance in terms of choosing publications that are published from another source outside of the US, these are things that you can do to kind of inoculate yourself a little bit, right?
Well, to that point, this is an interesting question now. You're talking about distance, right? And how distance brings you a certain sense of clarity and almost objectivity because you're distanced from it. Do you feel, because in a sense, we are distanced from what's going on in America, right? We talk about it all the time, but we're distanced from it in terms of physically, we're distant. And second of all, because we're not living in that society currently, so from a day-to-day impact on us, it doesn't have that immediate impact in terms of our daily lives because we're living in a different society right now. Emotionally, we're attached to that place, but physically and in terms of day-to-day impact, we're not. So do you feel like that gives us more clarity almost because we can kind of detach ourselves a little bit to a degree and look at it kind of more, or try to look at it more objectively than if we were just living there and we were so emotional about it because we're so tied to what's happening?
I think you're going to definitely lose some of that clarity being far away because you're not there in the cut. So I have conversations with friends in the States where I'm just saying, I'm like, look, I'm reading different news outlets and I understand what's going on right now, but I asked them what's it really like on the ground? And then I get different stories and perspectives, and which is different than what I'm being fed from the media. So I mean, I think being away from everything, you can maybe think we can maybe have an unbiased perspective, maybe, but I mean, I think you really have to be there, and form your own opinion based off of actual interaction and experience.
But there is such a thing as being too close to something, right? We know this from working on different things. If you work on something and you've been working on it for days and days and months, you get so close and so caught up in it that you end up losing perspective on it. And you need to get someone's fresh perspective, fresh eyeballs to look at it and be like, okay, how does this look to you? Right? We always do that.
Well, let me backtrack for a second. So it's almost like, I'm just going to use an example I had, basic example of a conversation I had. I was talking to a friend, and I was like, okay, so we've talked about this a few times on the podcast where we try to read and watch different news outlets, just like you said. You're watching Fox News and New York Times, Economist, stuff like that. So they kind of run the gamut, right? So I'm talking with friends. I'm like, yeah, I've read this and I read that. I can see that's pretty much a shit show. I mean, that's the only conclusion I can get out of it. What's it really like for you? You know what I mean? And so that's just another source, where you can maybe form an opinion. So that's all I'm saying. I think it's just like, you being far away, yes, you can probably see things a little bit clearer because you're not heavily influenced by the nonstop, I guess, whether it's, in person with your friends or family or work, the news outlets, being in the cut. But being far away, yeah, maybe you can be able to think and see and really, ponder about what's really factual, what's not, and form some perspective.
It's a good question. It's actually, there's two sides of it, right? And you kind of like looked at it from one angle, but there's two angles to it. So you talked about, this notion of like being too close to something, right? Like, I mean, like people, like if you take a book and you put it all the way up to your eyes, you won't be able to read the words. Or if you look at it,
you read one word at a time.
Or you look at an impressionist painting and you go up too close and you see a Monet and all you see is a bunch of dots, right? And you've got to zoom out a little bit to kind of understand what you're seeing. Like, absolutely, that's true. On the other hand, David Hume, like a major philosopher, once said, moral imagination diminishes with distance. And so that's the flip side. And what it means is that if something's happening in a country, like a war or a famine, and when you read about it from a distance, you aren't able to connect emotionally to what's really happening on the ground, and you have to have that conversation, right? So when you bring both those sides together, there's a famous samurai, Miyamoto Musashi, right? He was like the most badass Japanese samurai ever. He killed like hundreds of people, never lost a battle. He was also a philosopher.
Damn.
And he said in strategy, it's important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distant view of close things. So I think both of you are absolutely right. And what we call this in business is just zooming in and zooming out. And so you have to be able to be agile enough to understand what's actually happening on the ground. So if I'm looking at Black Lives Matter, I need to actually go in and take samples and understand and interview and talk to people who are on the ground and get different perspectives and then balance them out and then zoom out. And at the same time, if I'm in that environment and something, is happening and I'm being barraged by messages, then I actually need to build some space. And whether it's physical space, or it's mental space, it's important. And that's why you see like Henry David Thoreau, all kinds like Goethe, all kinds of incredible philosophers and thinkers, they would retreat to their wooden cabin, and then spend like 6 months there. Yeah. But I think you have to do both. And so I think it's really the combination of the two.
And also probably just boils down to this simple question of, does emotion cloud judgment, right? Because when you're too close to something, that's when you get really emotional about it, right? And rightly so. There's a lot of emotional things happening over there right now. So when you're too emotional, does that cloud your judgment, right? And like you said, the distance kind of metaphor is like, I can be standing in my small little town of like whatever city I'm in, it's like a little rural town, and I look down on the ground and I'm seeing the earth. But I'm only seeing like where my feet are.
Yeah.
But if I'm like in like the International Space Station orbiting around the earth, looking at the earth, I'm still looking at the earth, but I can see the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you get a macro perspective of like what is happening as a whole instead of what's happening so locally to you.
And that's a powerful metaphor. And like some of the recent films that have come out, or some of the documentaries that come out, where we actually can take footage from space when you look at the earth. Yeah. And when you look at that, and maybe some kind of virtual reality, and this like the astronauts that they've interviewed, and they're like, God, like all of a sudden you see like it's so much bigger. Like you're such a tiny little speck.
It's like a philosophical kind of like epiphany you have about your existence and life, when you see it from that perspective.
And I 100% agree. And at the same time, like concurrently, in parallel, you need emotion. And the reason you need emotion is that without emotion, you won't be able to understand people. Yeah. And ultimately it's all about people. And so emotion is our language to be able to like look at someone and build connection and see how they're feeling. Like I walked in today and I was like, how are you kind of quiet? Like what's going on?
That's so true, because like in my metaphor of just distance, an alien can come and come to our earth and look at the earth and be like, okay, I see what's going on.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be able to understand because they can't connect emotionally to the human race, right?
Yeah. Wow, this conversation didn't go the way we expected.
That's how it always is, though. Right?
Good chat, though.
Yeah, that's how it always is.
I don't know, man. Everything is just so fucked up right now, and so it's just like, I know like we always talk about this stuff, and like for the last kind of few episodes, I think, you know, it's kind of been on the same kind of topic. But I don't know, like it's just because,
how can you avoid it?
Yeah,
That's the thing, you know.
It's like
such
weirder
a
not to
huge
talk
part
about
of our life.
Yeah,
You can't avoid it.
Yeah.
but it's like the main thing that's happening right now in terms of like entertainment globally, like global political entertainment, like what's happening in the United States is like this constant source of like entertainment. And I hate to use that word because I don't want to make light of what's going on over there. Like obviously it's very serious, but it's like, it's such a shit show. You can't like look away from it. Like it's hard to look away because like you just like you're so caught up in what's going on, and almost it's literally like almost every day something crazy happens.
Yeah, but even something so stupid where the big debate is whether or not one should wear a mask.
Oh yeah,
You know, that's a literal debate.
yep.
You know, and there are clear sides to that debate. And to me, it's mind blowing. And I had a recent, small conversation with somebody that was pro anti-mask, and his perspective is that
This is in the States?
of course,
Okay.
of course,
Okay.
come on, yeah. So, and he's a Trump supporter, and he's he's a freedom fighter, you know.
So what did he say?
No, his basic thesis statement was the idea of wearing masks is not going to prevent you from getting COVID, and it's not going to prevent somebody else from getting COVID from you if you had it, because the mask itself is not, it as a barrier for the virus means that the virus needs to exist, and to him, the virus does not exist because the idea of a virus is self-made. So it's because your body is like, his analogy is it's like a garbage can. It's like you have, you put garbage out and it's nasty and dirty and there's flies everywhere. But you can have the same garbage can without garbage in it. There's no flies in it. So it's
what?
like, yeah.
What? That doesn't make any sense. What the fuck are you talking
flies is like, it's like the virus, right? It's like attracted to garbage, and if your body is like,
So if you're a healthy body, you can't get the virus.
Yes.
The virus won't be.
So it's like healthy mind, and it's like, I'm like listening to this, I'm like, what?
So he's on a different planet.
But here's the thing,
he's on another planet.
Yeah,
this guy.
but here's the thing, it's like, it's not just him.
Oh, I know.
Because it started on Facebook. We're having this conversation, and there's a whole group of people that are just.
So they don't believe anything the medical professionals are saying.
Well, they're saying that it's like the idea of a virus is that like it's getting blown out of proportion.
So they think it's like a conspiracy
for control.
So they're like, they think it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, sure. And there's a whole group of people that think that way, or they think that the numbers are exaggerated.
Yeah.
And it's not really that bad. But that's just a different.
So in their mind,
form of conspiracy.
in their mind, because it's not just the U.S. that got hit by this virus, it was a global thing. So in their mind, the whole world is in on this conspiracy.
In their mind, they're probably not even considering that. Like all they care about right now is because it is.
So that means China was in on this conspiracy.
No,
what does that mean? Like
I would have to speculate that when you're dealing with like different groups of people like this, they're not actually like using like logical arguments.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
does he listen to the show?
I have no idea.
If you're listening to the show, you know who you are. Pull your head out of your fucking ass, dude.
But
Wear a fucking mask.
I try not to
Man up.
not to be judgmental here, but I don't let this stuff bother me. I don't read this shit. Like it doesn't bother me.
No, it doesn't bother me.
I wouldn't even talk
mind-blowing.
about it. I absolutely wouldn't even waste a breath on it because it's more of a philosophical question. I would zoom out a little bit, right? I wouldn't even I think it's boring actually. I would just say that when you build a system, human beings can't live like in independent units. Like we would all die, right? Like we form societies. We've talked about this, like blueprint, right? So the question is like we exist in different kinds of organizational systems, and so how much control do you give people, and how much control do you exercise, at the central level, So I think that's really the question, right? So like the reason this is happening in the U.S. is that we have relatively weak central control, and it's partially due to the leader in place, but also because of the system that was set up from the very beginning between the states and the federal government. And there, like Hamilton versus Jefferson, I think Hamilton was an advocate of like the stronger kind of federal system. We call it federal here in China. We call it central. And I think it was Jefferson that was more an advocate, and that was his own personal bias, right? I mean, I don't know how long-term he was looking, but he was an advocate of having stronger states. And so you see now in this structure with such a massive physical place and a weak structure, so that you have people that are not credible, right? I don't want to judge them and say they're idiots. They're not educated. They don't have the background to be able to make the decision for themselves. And they would not be able to develop the infrastructure for a country. There has to be certain engineers and really intelligent people, lawyers, doctors, whatever, that help build the infrastructure of society so that everyone can benefit from that. And then the rest of the society has to obey the rules. But the way that the U.S. is set up right now is that in a time of a pandemic, you see the weakness of the system. Now, if you talk about like innovation in high tech or, innovation in arts and music, maybe the system we have set up is conducive to that. But we clearly see, as we talked about in previous episodes, like this different systems. And the question here is, how much control do you give people? And, we don't need to go further on this particular topic, but you can everyone can kind of do the math a little bit. Like why is in China or places like this where we've had a much better response, and why is it all fucked up in the U.S.?
Well, I think it because I've actually thought about this, and in a way, to simplify it, I feel like it really comes down to trust. It comes down to trust, not necessarily control, because every government only has, in reality, a limited control of the people. Now, some appear to have more control. Some try to create more control than others. But in reality, there's only so much you can control. So I feel like what's happening in the U.S., and like you say, the coronavirus, current pandemic and everything is exposing the weaknesses, is a lack of trust. People have no trust for governing bodies there. Whether it's local, state governing bodies or federal, there's very, very little trust. So what happens when there's very, very little trust? People start forming their own ideas when, regardless of what the information or the professionals or the authority figures or whoever is saying. So there's no trust in the media. There's no trust in the government. There's no trust in leadership. There's no trust in the policing. There's zero trust. So when there's zero trust, people are just going to be like, fuck it. I'm going to think what I think, and fuck what you say. I'm going to do what I want to do. Because there's zero trust, why should I listen to you?
But they also get, yeah.
And that's manifesting in many different ways, both racially, through this pandemic, politically. There's just no more trust going on. And if we want to draw parallels, I'm not saying that all the Chinese citizens trust the government here. I'm not saying that. But there is a different level and degree of trust in terms of, if you tell me there's a virus and you say wearing a mask and you tell me to lock down, we're going to obey that because we trust that that's what's happening, and we trust that this is what's going to get us over it. But over there's no trust. Like, if you tell me to lock down, fuck you, I'm not locking down. I don't even believe there's a virus. Like, there's zero trust.
Well, yes. I would agree. I would say that you bring up a really good point with trust. I would say that I would put some nuance on it, right? I wouldn't probably go out and say, okay, there's no trust, because that's a categorical statement, right? Or I wouldn't say that like no one trusts anything and this and that, right? There is levels of trust, and what we see right now in in these movements in the U.S. is that there's different levels of trust, and trust is breaking down in certain parts.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying there's zero trust. Right. I'm saying there's a lower level of trust.
So there's like a breakdown of some of the trust, and trust is certainly a factor. It's one of the factors, and I think you bring up a really good point that it is one of the factors. The other thing is that is not a trust issue, is that the actual president is not acknowledging that this is a fucking issue. So like, that's not even a trust issue. That's his trust issue, right? So if the president would come out and be completely aligned with the Republicans and the Democrats, with all the governors and Fauci, like it is in China. Like no one in China, like no fucking, Politburo guys are like,
Yeah.
right.
But
and
that
the
is a trust thing.
Well, it's
because
a trust,
Trump is not trusting his own government.
Right,
He's not trusting the medical professionals,
right.
what they're saying. He's not trusting the media. He's always saying, "Oh, this media fake news,
but
fake
that's
news."
one person. So
it's all about distrust.
That's not a systematic trust thing on his part. That's I wouldn't say that's a trust thing. I just say that that's like incompetence, right, on his part. Regarding what you were saying about people not trusting, there's different levels of distrust. So it's a combination. The control piece is huge because, of course, control is predicated on like the trust and the structure and the power structure, right? If there wasn't military, there wasn't police, like it goes hand in hand. I agree. Like if you look at it from the people's perspective, it's probably trust. If you look at it from the hierarchical perspective, it's control. But like contact tracing, the fact that like every city you go to, the technology is also in place, and that is a type of control. So when I say control, I don't just mean like
Can I add something
political
really quickly?
control.
Okay, go on.
They know exactly where you are. Every city you go to, you just scan and they know. So the ability to actually know who's infected and be able to trace that is a type of control that has also helped China avoid.
Justin's ready to explode right now.
Okay, no, you make a great point. But let me ask you, right? Let me ask you, and we're just having a friendly debate. Let me ask you. You go back to
it's
like
your birthday, man. Anything you say, anything you want.
You go back to like technology.
Okay, someone okay.
You go back to technology and like the lack of like contact tracing that they have in the States versus here where you can scan your phone, you know where you've been.
No, it's not you can scan your phone. It's you must scan your phone.
But that technology was built in the first place. Like no one forced us to have this technology. We downloaded it ourselves and we actually enjoy using it. Like it makes our lives very convenient on a day-to-day process. Like I'm happy we have that.
I don't
on a personal level.
It's not just you made the decision. It's that the investment they had in the payment systems and the way the payment system works and social benefits and everything is that if you're not part of the system, you'll fucking die.
You won't die, but you can opt out of the system.
You can't opt out of the system.
I can choose not to have football.
Yeah.
I can
if
choose
you're
that.
a Chinese citizen,
I'm not
you
gonna
can't
die.
opt out of the citizen. You can't
No,
opt out. Like, you can't buy anything.
I agree that
Use cash.
I agree that
And you don't have a job.
that the system is optimized for that. It is definitely optimized. But what I'm saying is no one physically forced us to download these things. What I'm saying, but that's not the point. The point is what we have in China in terms of contact tracing, the technology, and this infringes on privacy to
The
a
lack
certain
of
degree.
privacy.
Yeah. Why? The same technology is available to the United States if they wanted it. And what the point you're making, they don't have it. So it's about control, you're saying. What I'm saying is, I think we're saying the same thing. What I'm saying is, why isn't that technology implemented in the United States? Is because people don't trust it. They don't trust that you can follow me where I've been for the last 30 days or a year or whatever it is. I don't trust that. I don't trust the government they're spying on me. So it all comes back to this lack of trust. That's why they won't accept this technology. They won't accept contract tracing. There will be riots and more protests in the streets if the government ever tried to implement that or like force that in the United States. Why? Because it's an emotional sense of distrust for everything. That the fact that you can trace me where I've been, right? That all my transactions is all digital and you can track that. It comes down to a lack of trust, which is why the West has not embraced this technology over there. Even though for a situation like this, like the pandemic, it can greatly help.
Well, I think it's a combination of trust, but also the biggest difference between a societal and cultural difference between the West and the East. You have this sort of like selfish self-centeredness that kind of comes across in the West in general, like personal freedom, my rights, me. In the East and in Asia, it's a little bit more about the group, and I mean that goes hand in hand, right? Don't you think?
It does go hand in hand.
Because it's like, well, you're so self-centered that I want to have my privacy. I don't, like, as if some dude's like watching every step you take, like in the back with the computer. Maybe there is, I don't know, but you know what I mean? It's just
but
like
that to me is a sense of distrust. Like that is distrust for the system.
But that's a big argument that people have. I mean, we are here. I mean, we're very aware that the fact that we're using our cell phone and we're using certain applications, that obviously it's open right now, and obviously that certain powers are able to access our information, but we continue anyway. We just do our thing anyway. And that would never happen in America. And even though it might actually already is happening, you know what I mean? But I mean, on the surface, it would not be accepted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would not be accepted to be openly like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just a total cultural difference. I think it's.
Yeah, but what the point I'm trying to, at the end of the day, I think we're all saying the same thing.
We're all saying the same thing.
It's just semantics at this point. Whether we're using it to label this or label that, we're all in agreement. What I'm saying is, I think the cultural thing,
Justin's
the control
just trying
thing,
to win the argument. He's like, we're just trying to I don't really have.
I really think when you boil everything
race.
Down, it's this lack of trust. That's what I really think. I don't have a horse
in this race. It's your birthday. It's all good, dude.
Well, there's no horse. There's no race to begin with.
No.
What I'm saying is,
we're all riding with you.
You have to make everything like a competition, dude.
No.
There was never a race to begin with. What I'm saying is, I think we're all saying the same thing, but when you
There's
boil
never
it down,
but what I'm saying is, we
I'm
all agree we're using semantics.
I'm
I'm
trying to clarify my point. And what it is I think it's the culture creates a lack of distrust.
Yeah. But that's why America...
A lack of trust, not a lack of distrust.
Maybe through time, but for now, America will never be able to get to that level that, we're at right now.
No, nor do they need to necessarily. I'm not saying everyone needs to be the same. I'm just thinking, what works for China won't necessarily work for the United States, and vice versa. What works for the United States will not work for China. The biggest misconception is that we can copy and paste our cultural beliefs or governmental methods or enforcements to every place that exists, and it's just that's the idea of
the
American
democracy.
Yeah, American democracy. We're gonna go invade this country and implement our democracy there, implement the way we know how to do things there, and it's just gonna work.
Yeah, if you're not a Christian,
and it never works.
You're not part of us.
Yeah, everything is every place is so different that there's no such thing as copy and paste. And we talked about this in the Ben Cavender episode, right? In terms of market and economics and businesses and retailers coming in, you can't just copy and paste, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, we definitely let this conversation get a little out of hand.
It always gets so political these days. Jesus.
It does. What's
going on?
It's funny though, because when we first started off doing this podcast, not this episode, but this podcast as a whole, we were okay, let's never get political.
Yeah, we talked about that.
We talked about that. We were okay,
that.
as one of our things, one of our principles, we will never get political because that's not what we're about.
But also,
and we don't know about politics.
But also, truth be told, I don't know about you guys, but I was never really into politics to begin with either.
I'd never give a shit.
Yeah.
But it's almost impossible not to like in in these days, because it's like it's just like so like crazy, you know what I mean? Like it's like the best. It's like Game of Thrones is happening right now, and so it's impossible like not to like watch an episode or two and like have your comments on the episode. It's like the greatest reality show ever to take place in history happening right now in our lives. Yeah. So it's like we have to tune in, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What do you think, Aric?
I think it's a good conversation.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, let's end it there.
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. Yeah, man. Again, hope everyone is well, safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Whether you agree with what we said or not, it doesn't matter. Have your own thoughts.
Form your own opinion.
Yeah.
But do subscribe. Because we got good shit for you.
And also, leave a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about. If you have thoughts on how we can improve the show, or just thoughts on maybe guests you want to hear from, or topics you want to hear us talk about, whatever. Just give us some more feedback so that we know how to proceed with this show so that it can be better for you.
Let us know what you're thinking.
For you.
Let us know what you're thinking.
Do you want us to speak more Chinese?
Yeah. What do you think?
Should we start a WeChat group?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, because
some
that's
conversation
the
going.
biggest problem with us. We don't have like a direct connection usually with a lot of listeners. I mean, some people do comment. There have been some very like longtime listeners, very loyal listeners that have been commenting. I really appreciate that. But more people should comment. Let us know what you think, positive or negative. Just let us know so we know how to improve the show and even ourselves. So anyway, that's all I got to say for today. You guys?
Happy 4th. Have some hot dogs.
Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day, America, to our friends in America.
You have to add the America part.
Well, you have to say Happy Independence Day because
it's an American holiday.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, anyway, I guess we'll end it there, guys. I'm Justin.
I'm how. What the fuck?
Wow, I thought you were. That was an honest mistake, wasn't
That was
it?
an honest mistake.
Wow.
I'm Aric.
And I am Howie.
Where is your mind at right now?
I don't know. Why do you want to be me, Eric? You don't want to be me.
Anyway, guys, peace.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace.
Love you.
The